So my name is Iliana Holguin, and I am a county commissioner for the county of El Paso. I represent Precinct 3, which encompasses what we call the Mission Valley, which starts in the Isleta area where we have the Isleta Mission. It goes through Socorro, where we have the Socorro Mission, all the way through to really the county line through San Elizario, where we also have some historic assets there, all the way to the county line. And then also north of the highway, north of I-10, one of the fastest growing areas of the county, where we see a lot of home building happening right now. So in this past redistricting that we just completed late last year, my precinct actually had to shrink the most out of all of the other precincts. Most of the other precincts had to actually grow. And that's just because my precinct has seen so much growth in the past few years, and we continue to see that growth. So I had to lose about 45,000 residents in the last redistricting to get me down to a size that was comparable to the other precincts. So right now, the four precincts each have a population of about 216,000. But I have a feeling my precinct, because of the continued growth, there's a lot of residential areas that are continuing to be built. I have a feeling that 10 years from now, when we do the next census, the next redistricting, I'll probably be in the same position again, or the office will be in the same position again, where we're having to get smaller, just because we've grown so much in population.
Okay, thank you so much for that information. You were nominated to our July top 10 Rising Lone Stars because of your work expanding the El Paso sewer and water systems to previously unconnected families in District 3. Tell me about the infrastructure needs of your district and what you intend to address them.
Yeah. So this is an issue that's incredibly important to me, and it's always been very, very important to me. And I think it's something that a lot of people don't really realize continues to be an issue. We still have neighborhoods that aren't connected to water and aren't connected to sewer. And these are two very basic rights that we all have. And the majority of us take them for granted. We know we can turn on our faucet and we're not going to have trouble accessing clean drinking water. We have a sewer system that we don't have to worry about failing. The large majority of us have that luxury. But what we need to understand is that there's still so many people in our community in the county of El Paso who don't have that luxury. We literally still have hundreds of neighborhoods where some of them may not have water, some of them may not have wastewater, and some of them still don't have either. So what happens is folks have to rely on bringing in water, so trucking in water, hiring a company to bring them water. But even then, that's not necessarily safe to drink. So then they have that additional expense of having to buy bottled water. And as far as the sewer goes, a lot of these neighborhoods still have septic tanks, which, if properly maintained and replaced when they're supposed to be replaced, septic tanks can work perfectly well. But the problem that we see in a lot of these neighborhoods is that they were built, back 30 years ago, back 40 years ago, in some cases in the 80s, even in the 70s. And a lot of these septic systems have never really been properly maintained, or they're starting to fail just simply because of their age and because they've met their lifespan. So then it becomes a really big health issue for these areas when you have septic tanks that are starting to fail, that aren't able to contain the waste that they were meant to contain. And so that's why it's so important, the connection to water, but also the connection to sewer. And so when I first ran for this position, that was one of the biggest needs that I identified right away. And thankfully, here at the County of El Paso, we've been able to make that a priority for us, is to try to make sure that we're able to connect as many of these neighborhoods as possible. There are hundreds of them, so it's going to be a gargantuan effort, but we're going to do it in baby steps, right? One neighborhood at a time, one community at a time. And I'm really, really lucky that the rest of the commissioners court um, really understands why this is so important and that they've been willing to set aside the funds to do that. So just as an example, the County of El Paso received $162 million in ARPA funding, the American Rescue Plan Act funding, and the Commissioners Court agreed to set aside 20% of that total, which comes out to 34 million, specifically to help connect these communities, these neighborhoods to water and wastewater. And that was just huge for me. I mean, that really showed that the County of El Paso really is committed to finding a solution for these families. So, unfortunately, even though 34 million sounds like a lot and it is a lot of money, it's still only going to help connect about 12 neighborhoods. But that's okay. That's okay. It's baby steps. We're going to do as much as we can. We're going to keep looking for the funding. And that's been a priority. So, for example, after we received the ARPA funding and we set aside the 34 million, we have two different Congress people here in El Paso. And one of them, Congressman Gonzalez, represents, he covers a small part of my area. His district, congressional district, runs all the way from San Antonio to El Paso. And so he covers a small corner of El Paso County, but that's my overlapping district. So when he started requesting, as all the congressmen and women did, started requesting proposals for community projects for funding through Congress through the appropriations process, we submitted a request to be able to connect 4 other neighborhoods to wastewater, and thankfully it was approved. Our project was chosen. So literally that project, it's been chosen by the congressman's office and literally is now just waiting to get through the process so that it can get to the president's desk for signature so that we can have access to those funds. So that's another way that we've found that we can potentially access funds to connect these neighborhoods. And then, of course, on top of that, we still do what we've always done, which is apply for grants. So the Texas Water Development Board has been very generous, and also the Department of Agriculture has been they've been very generous as far as funding connection projects to water and wastewater. And so the county continues to apply for those grants as well. And it's through a grant through the agriculture department that actually the Lourdes and Conquistador neighborhoods were able to get connections to wastewater. That was the groundbreaking that we had just a couple of months ago that was featured in the top 10 article.
Wow. I find it very inspirational that you were so quickly able to identify the needs of your community, which actually leads me to my next question. You have an extensive history of nonprofit work and activism within your community. What inspired the transition to local government, and how has that furthered your community goals?
Yeah. For me, it was, I think, just a logical next step. So I've been an attorney now for a little over 20 years. I think I'm going on my 22nd year now. And a big part of my career has been working at nonprofits, where that's been my entire focus, is trying to reach underserved communities. So I'm an immigration attorney. So I my clients were the most marginalized, the most in need of help, the ones that needed immigration status, the ones that were most afraid to try to find out how they go about regularizing their status. So a lot of my work was going out into the community, trying to explain to folks, this is what's available to you, this is what you can avail yourself of, this is what you qualify for, and this will help your family be able to move ahead if you do this. And so I was really used to going out into the community and talking to the community directly one-on-one. That was one of my biggest jobs, even though I was the executive director, in addition to overseeing all of our staff and providing that legal oversight. I took it upon myself to be the one to always go out into the community. So anytime we received a phone call that, a school, a church, a neighborhood association, a housing unit, their residents, wanted a presentation on immigration benefits, I would do those myself. And I anytime anyone invited me, I would go and I was there. So that was, I think, already a big part of who I was. So when I decided to run for office, I did that because my part of town, it does include a large part of the rural part of the county, the unincorporated part of the county, where you find a lot of these neighborhoods that don't have connections to water and wastewater. So El Paso County has a population of about 860,000, a little under 800, no, a little under 700, I think, live within the city of El Paso. So that's incorporated. So they've got all of the services. The remaining 160, almost 200,000 people live outside of the city of El Paso. We do have smaller municipalities, but they're much, 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 much smaller. So you have a lot of people who live in unincorporated, many times rural parts of the county. And that's where you find that a lot of these services are still unavailable. Um, so as I decided to run for office, it was because I really felt like, I could get into the communities, I could try to figure out what the different needs were, and then try to do something about it. And so that's what I did. And like I said, I've been incredibly, incredibly lucky that the rest of the commissioners court also agrees that these are really, really important issues that we have to try to resolve. Um, I think everyone knows it's not going to be an overnight thing. We're not going to be able to connect hundreds of families just kind of overnight. And the challenge for funding, that's always going to be a challenge. But like I said, all we can do is little by little connect every neighborhood that we can. Um, because really, we're in the year 2022 in the richest country in the world. We should not have people, our fellow community members who still don't have access to clean drinking water or sanitary sewer service.
Absolutely. And I think it's amazing how you help so many people with that, and especially with the budget, how difficult it is to really give them a voice, which leads me to my next question. In an interview with El Paso Times, you described yourself as a consensus maker, willing to work with people to relay a unified voice. Rising Lone Stars was born out of a desire to highlight local government at a time when national politics seems constant with like division and polarization. So, what are your thoughts on the ability for local politics to transcend party boundaries and force consensus building?
Yeah. I think consensus building is so, so, so important. The commissioners court, there are five of us, and our areas of the county are very different. They're similar in a lot of ways, but they're still very different. Our needs are very different. And, we have some precincts that don't have the same issues that my precinct does because they don't cover any unincorporated areas. And so it's really important to make sure that the other commissioners really understand the needs, understand why this is important, even though it may not affect them or their constituents directly, why connecting homes to water and wastewater is good for our entire community, for the health and safety of our entire community. So consensus building is very, very important. And I've just, with the different roles that I've had in my life, that's something that I've always had to do, is try to bring people together to make sure that we're focused on the common goal, that we recognized what that common goal was, and that we're all working towards that common goal. So I definitely, definitely, definitely believe in, bringing people together, um, building that consensus, not trying to, I don't know, bully other people to think the way that I do or to agree with me, but really to make them understand why it's important and why I'm trying to do what I'm trying to do. So definitely consensus building, I think, is a very important part of any local government, whether you're talking about a commissioner's court for the county or city council or your local school district. I think that that's the way that we're going to get things done. The things that we need to get done for our community, that's how we're going to do it, by coming together, working together, and finding a solution together. Not about, not, throwing blame around or hashing up things that may have happened, 30 years ago and old disagreements. And that's not the way to do it. It's by coming together, identifying that common goal, and then making sure that everyone is on board towards making it happen.